Why do we keep making the same mistakes? It's a question that haunts almost everyone at some point in life. We tell ourselves we've learned our lesson. We promise we won't go back. We swear we've changed, and yet we return to the same choices, the same habits, the same people, as if some invisible force is quietly pulling the strings from behind the curtain. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in the history of psychology, had a name for that force. He called it the unconscious. According to Jung, our lives aren't just shaped by conscious decisions and rational thought. Most of the time, we are being driven by something deeper, older, darker, something we haven't yet faced. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Let that sink in. That mistake you keep repeating, that toxic person you keep going back to, that self-sabotage that always shows up when things start going well. It might not be a failure of willpower, it might be your unconscious playing itself out like a script you didn't know you were following. And here's the hardest part. You're not supposed to see it. The unconscious is, by definition, hidden. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in patterns, in symbols, in attraction and resistance, in what you love and what you can't stand. And the more you try to ignore it, the louder it gets. Jung believed that the unconscious isn't just a dumping ground for thoughts we've forgotten. It's a living, breathing ecosystem of everything we've rejected about ourselves, our fears, our insecurities, our past traumas, even our untapped potential. He called this rejected part of ourselves the shadow. The shadow is the other you, the parts you don't want to admit, the pain you've buried, the emotions you pretend don't exist, the voices you silence to survive. And when those parts are denied, they don't disappear. They leak out in anger, in jealousy, in addiction, in failed relationships, in self-destruction. So why do we keep making the same mistakes? Because the shadow keeps finding a way back into the light. But here's the hope. Jung didn't believe we were doomed to repeat forever. He believed the path to freedom begins with awareness. When you start to recognize the pattern, not just intellectually but emotionally, you begin to loosen its grip. When you stop blaming the outside world and start asking, what part of me is drawn to this? You start reclaiming your power. Let's take an example. Imagine someone who always ends up in controlling relationships. At first glance, it looks like bad luck. But under the surface, there's often something deeper. A childhood wound, a fear of abandonment, a buried belief that love has to be earned through suffering. Without healing that root, they will unconsciously seek what's familiar, not what's healthy. The same goes for procrastination, for addiction, for self-doubt. There is always a message behind the madness. Jung saw mistakes not as failures, but as clues. The mistake is the symptom. The real issue lies underneath. And this is where things get powerful. Jung taught that if you approach the unconscious with honesty and curiosity, not judgment, it begins to speak, in dreams, in synchronicities, in the gut feeling you keep ignoring, in the people who trigger you. All of it is feedback. All of it is trying to show you something you haven't yet integrated. One of Jung's most famous ideas is that of projection. It's the tendency to see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. So when you meet someone you instantly dislike, or envy, or fear, it might be your shadow being reflected back at you. What if the traits you hate in others are traits you've disowned in yourself? What if the reason you keep falling into the same trap is because you haven't yet acknowledged the part of you that walks straight into it? This is the uncomfortable truth. The mistake isn't just out there, it's also in here. But the moment you become aware, everything begins to shift. Suddenly, that toxic pattern becomes a lesson. That breakup becomes a mirror. That failure becomes a compass pointing inward. Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey of becoming whole, not perfect, not flawless, but whole, to bring together the conscious and the unconscious, to face the shadow and reclaim the power it holds, to stop pretending and start integrating. It's not easy. In fact, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It means facing pain you've buried for years. It means owning the choices you've made. It means accepting that healing is not a straight line, but the reward, freedom. Freedom from old cycles, freedom from unconscious repetition, freedom from the illusion that you are broken, because you are not broken. You are simply divided, and every mistake is a call to wholeness. Jung believed that life gives us the same lesson over and over, not to punish us, but to wake us up. Each time you fall into the same trap, the voice gets a little louder. Look, here, something wants to be seen. The mistake is the teacher. The discomfort is the guide. So ask yourself, what do my repeated mistakes have in common? What part of me is trying to protect me, even if it's doing it in a destructive way? What emotion do I keep pushing away? What am I afraid will happen if I finally let go of the past? These aren't questions to answer in one sitting. They are questions to live with, to carry, to explore, to sit with in silence. Because the real transformation doesn't happen in moments of clarity, it happens in moments of courage. Courage to go inward, courage to listen, courage to forgive yourself again and again. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you can't become who you are until you see who you've been pretending to be. And you can't see that until you stop running from your own reflection. So maybe it's time to stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what part of me keeps walking into this story? You're not cursed. You're not unlucky. You're not doomed to repeat forever. You're just being invited to go deeper. The pattern will persist until the lesson is learned, and once it is, something shifts. You'll still make mistakes, but they won't come from blindness. They'll come from boldness. You'll still feel pain, but it will no longer control you. You'll still meet challenges, but you'll face them with your whole self, not just the mask you wear. And maybe one day you'll look back and realize every mistake was a message, every heartbreak was a doorway, every cycle was a map back to your soul. That's what Carl Jung believed, and deep down, maybe you believe it too. We left off with a question. What part of me keeps walking into this story? And when you ask that question, not just once, but deeply, honestly, without flinching, you begin a different kind of journey. Not the journey of fixing yourself, but the journey of meeting yourself. Carl Jung didn't believe we're here to become something new. He believed we're here to remember who we are, beneath the layers we've built to survive. You see, from a young age, we start learning what parts of us are acceptable. Be polite, be strong. Don't cry, don't be angry, don't be too much. And so we begin to hide. We tuck away our sadness. We numb our rage. We silence our intuition. Piece by piece, we trade authenticity for approval, but the parts we disown don't disappear. They become the shadow, and sooner or later the shadow knocks. Sometimes it knocks through heartbreak, sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through a moment of silence that feels unbearably loud. Whatever form it takes, it comes bearing a message. There is more to you than what you've been allowed to be. Jung believed that healing isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness, and wholeness means making peace with your contradictions. It means knowing you can be strong and still struggle. You can be kind and still have rage. You can love and still carry wounds. This is the heart of individuation, the sacred process of becoming fully yourself. Not the self you perform, but the self you abandoned. And relationships, Jung said, are the greatest mirrors in this process. Why? Because people reflect our wounds back to us in ways we can't ignore. The partner who triggers your insecurity, the friend who makes you feel invisible, the parent whose love you're still chasing, even as an adult. They're not just people. They are portals, opportunities to see the parts of you that still need attention, love, and truth. But instead of seeing the lesson, we often react. We blame, we shut down, we run away, we project. Jung warned that projection is one of the most powerful defenses of the ego. We push what we cannot accept in ourselves onto others. We label them as toxic, narcissistic, clingy, cold. But rarely do we stop and ask, what part of me is being activated right now? Because maybe what we fear in them is also hidden in us. And here's the twist. The same goes for what we admire. That person who inspires you, the one whose confidence lights up the room, that's your shadow too, because Jung didn't see the shadow as only darkness. He saw it as the container of your unlived life, your creativity, your wildness, your passion, your truth, everything you were told to suppress in order to fit in. So the work isn't just about facing the pain, it's about reclaiming your power. And you do that by feeling, by letting the grief rise, by sitting in the discomfort, by no longer escaping every time your soul starts to speak. We live in a world that encourages distraction, but Jung reminded us that the treasure we seek is hidden in the cave we fear to enter. And here's the paradox. The more you resist your inner world, the more power it has over you. But when you face it, really face it, you begin to integrate. And integration is how the unconscious becomes conscious. It's how the repeating cycle loses its fuel. It's how the same old mistake finally becomes a new beginning. So if you've been stuck repeating the same patterns, losing yourself in the same wounds, maybe it's not a sign of failure. Maybe it's a sign that your soul is ready to wake up, ready to heal what was hidden, ready to become whole. Because as Jung said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. And that choice, what I choose to become, is not made once. It's made in every moment you're tempted to abandon yourself, every time you feel the pull to shrink, to please, to hide, and yet you pause, you breathe, you choose to stay. That is transformation, quiet, invisible, and deeply powerful, because the world won't often celebrate you for healing. There's no applause for sitting alone in your room, confronting your demons, no spotlight for choosing growth over comfort, but the soul notices, the soul remembers. And something begins to shift. You stop chasing love in places that drain you. You stop apologizing for your sensitivity, your boundaries, your voice. You stop begging to be chosen and choose yourself. But let's be honest, this path is not easy. Healing sounds beautiful, but often feels like falling apart. Because to find your true self, you have to let go of the false one, the mask, the roles, the person you became to survive, and that grief is real. Jung called it the night sea journey, a descent into the depths of the unconscious, a time when everything you thought you were dissolves, your identity cracks. Your certainty vanishes, and all you're left with is silence. But within that silence, something ancient stirs, a knowing, a voice that was buried beneath the noise of expectation and fear. And if you listen, really listen, you'll hear the whisper, you are more than what has happened to you. You are not your trauma, not your past, not your patterns. You are the awareness that sees it all and chooses differently. And that is where your power lives, not in controlling others, not in fixing everything, but in how you respond when the same wound comes knocking. Will you react? Or will you reflect? Will you collapse into the old story? Or will you write a new one? Because every pattern is a story, a narrative we repeat because it's familiar, even if it hurts. I'm not worthy. I'm too much. People always leave, but these are not truths. They're echoes, echoes of unmet needs, echoes of childhood, echoes of generations past. Jung believed we carry not only our own wounds, but the wounds of our ancestors. He called it the collective unconscious, a reservoir of inherited memory. So when you break a pattern, you're not just healing yourself. You're healing those who came before you and those who will come after. You become a link in the chain that chooses consciousness over repetition, love over fear, truth over illusion. But beware. Your ego won't go quietly. It will tempt you to numb, to point fingers, to sink back into the comfort of dysfunction. Because healing isn't linear. Some days, you'll feel enlightened. Other days, you'll feel broken all over again. That's okay. You're not failing. You're cycling, you're spiraling upward, touching the same themes, but from a higher level of awareness. Think of it like climbing a mountain in circles. Each time you pass the same spot, your view is wider. You understand more. You react less. You grow, and eventually the wound becomes a scar. Not erased, but no longer bleeding, a reminder of what you've survived, and a symbol of what you've become. Because Jung didn't promise that healing would make you happy. He promised it would make you whole, and there's a difference. Happiness is fleeting. Wholeness is eternal. Wholeness means embracing your mess and your magic, your fear and your courage, your flaws and your brilliance. Wholeness is what happens when you stop running from yourself and return home. So if you're tired of the same mistakes, if your heart aches with familiar pain, if life keeps showing you the same lesson, take it as an invitation, not to be harder on yourself, but to go deeper within yourself. Because the truth is, the mistake isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. It's life saying, there is something here you have not yet faced, and once you face it, once you name it, feel it and love it, you reclaim the part of you that was lost, and suddenly, the cycle ends, not because the world changed, but because you did. And so we return to where we began. Why do we keep making the same mistakes? Because the soul does not evolve through comfort. It evolves through reflection, through heartbreak, through conscious choice. Mistakes are not failures, they are guideposts. And when we finally listen to what they're trying to teach us, we stop living in repetition and start living in revelation, and that is where transformation begins. But here's something no one tells you. Sometimes you outgrow your old life before the new one is ready. You see the pattern, you break the loop, you stop running, and suddenly everything feels quiet, too quiet. The distractions are gone. The chaos is gone. But so is the noise that kept you numb, and in that stillness the real work begins. Carl Jung believed that wholeness comes only after descent, the descent into the unconscious, into the parts of ourselves we'd rather not see, our shame, our jealousy, our rage, our fear of not being enough. He called this confrontation holding the tension of the opposites. Because we are not one thing. We are paradoxes. We long for love and fear intimacy. We want to be seen but hide our truth. We crave freedom and cling to control. And so much of our suffering comes from trying to resolve these opposites too quickly. But Jung taught that real growth happens when we hold the contradiction without needing to fix it right away, when we learn to sit with the discomfort of being both strong and fragile, both certain and confused, both healing and hurting. Because in that tension, something alchemical happens. The psyche begins to transform, not by force, but by integration. Integration doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means you stop identifying with it. You stop saying, I am broken, and instead you say, a part of me is hurting, and I'm holding space for it. This subtle shift is where freedom begins, because when we stop being the wound, we can begin to heal the wound. We create distance, we develop awareness, and from awareness, we make new choices, more conscious ones, more aligned ones. But awareness, Jung warned, is a double-edged sword. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you awaken, you can't go back to sleep. The life that once felt normal now feels suffocating. The relationships that once distracted you now feel hollow. The roles you played no longer fit. This is what Jung called the withdrawal of projections. It's the moment you stop blaming others for your pain and take full responsibility for your healing. You no longer see your partner as the villain, but as the mirror. You no longer chase people who don't value you because you've remembered your worth. You no longer beg for love because you found it within. But here's the catch. This kind of inner work can be incredibly lonely because the world around you hasn't changed. Only you have. And so you may feel like a stranger in your own life. Friends drift. Conversations feel shallow. You're no longer interested in gossip, drama, or noise. You crave depth, authenticity, real connection, and not everyone will understand that. But that's okay, because this journey isn't about being understood. It's about becoming whole. It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself that you lost while trying to be what others needed. It's about remembering that you are not here to be perfect. You're here to be real, to be messy, to be human, and that means feeling. Jung once said, "Emotion is the chief source of becoming conscious." So if you're feeling more than ever, don't numb it. That pain you're carrying, that sorrow, that longing, it's not weakness, it's awakening. It's your soul knocking, it's asking to be met, to be known, to be loved. And when you meet yourself fully in the light and the dark, you stop making the same mistakes. Not because life gets easier, but because you've become wiser, more present, more whole. You begin to respond instead of react. You stop seeking validation and start honoring your own truth. You stop performing and start living. And yes, the world may not reward this at first, but your soul will. You'll sleep better, breathe deeper, love fuller. Because the war inside you is no longer raging. And that peace, that quiet confidence, that is the fruit of inner work. Not applause, not perfection, but peace. That's the reward. So if you're walking through the fire right now, if your old life is crumbling, if your heart is breaking open, keep going. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. Because beneath the pain is a deeper truth. You are not broken, you are becoming. Becoming is not an event, it's a process. And sometimes that process will make you question everything. Who you are, why you're here, what it all means. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of awakening. You are shedding skins, and shedding hurts. But what hurts more is staying trapped in what no longer fits. Most people don't change because they're brave. They change because staying the same becomes unbearable. And when that threshold is crossed, when the soul can no longer tolerate the lie, we begin to transform, not always with grace, often with grief, with resistance, with trembling hands and a breaking heart. But we move, we let go, we trust. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Fate, that mysterious force we often blame when life doesn't go our way. But what if fate is just the pattern we haven't questioned yet? What if destiny isn't written in the stars, but in the choices we make when no one is watching? The choice to pause instead of explode, to speak truth instead of perform, to walk away instead of cling, to stay with the pain instead of run from it. These are the choices that shape a soul. Not the big moments, but the small ones, the invisible ones, the moments where you could repeat the cycle, but you don't. You feel the familiar pull of an old wound, and you breathe through it. You remember who you used to be, and you choose differently, and no one may notice. But your soul notices, your inner child notices, the future you who is free definitely notices. This is how we rewrite the story. Not with declarations, but with decisions. Every pattern is a door, and every door can be walked through. But you must be willing to face what lies on the other side. Your anger, your need to control, your fear of being abandoned, your hunger to be seen, your grief. Jung's Work reminds us we don't heal by pretending those parts don't exist. We heal by bringing them into the light, by sitting with them, by understanding them, and by integrating them, not as enemies, but as messengers. Your anger is not the problem. It's the protector. Your fear is not weakness. It's a warning sign from your past. Your shame is not truth. It's a memory asking to be released. And when you stop rejecting these parts and start listening to them, something incredible happens. They soften. They stop screaming because they've finally been heard. This is the inner reconciliation Jung spoke of, the union of opposites, the shadow and the light, the ego and the soul, the self you show to the world, and the self that whispers in the dark. When these pieces come together, not only do you feel more whole, you feel more alive, more real, because nothing is being suppressed anymore. There is no war inside. There is only presence, peace, depth. And from this place, you begin to relate differently. You don't love from lack. You love from overflow. You don't need others to complete you. You invite them to grow with you. You don't fear abandonment. You trust your own presence enough to stay. And this is when relationships stop being battlegrounds and become sacred spaces, spaces for healing, for mirroring, for growth, for intimacy. Real intimacy. Not the kind that comes from merging identities, but the kind that comes from seeing each other clearly and choosing each other fully. But again, that kind of connection starts with you, with how you show up for yourself, with whether you abandon yourself when things get hard or hold yourself with tenderness and truth. This is the final gift of Jung's wisdom. To become whole is to come. Home, home to the self, home to the mystery, home to the unfolding of your own becoming. And from this home, everything changes. Not because the world shifts, but because you do. You see clearer, you speak gentler, you live braver, you love deeper, and the old patterns, they lose their grip. Because you've remembered the truth, you are not doomed to repeat the past. You are not broken, you are not too late, you are not your mistakes. You are the awareness behind them, the one who sees, the one who chooses, the one who is free. So next time the same old pain returns, the same familiar mistake knocks on your door, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what is life trying to teach me here? What part of me is asking to be seen, to be loved, to be set free? And then, with gentleness and courage, listen, because that's where transformation begins, not in avoiding the darkness, but in walking into it with your eyes wide open.